Barry by Bill Hader has finally concluded, and this is my second attempt at making this video. Yeah, so first time around, I think I wasn't entirely thinking about the fact that this is it. Like, this is the end. We're not going to see these characters again. They're gone. This is the final episode of the show, and I was kind of treating it like just any other episode. I'm going to try to not do that. This is one of my favorite shows, and a show that I think is one of the best on TV, and now it's gone. And at the same time, Succession, another one of my favorite shows on TV, ended. So both these ending at the same time has kind of made me want to talk about them in a more wide sense instead of just boiling it down to just this episode or even just this season. So here you go. Barry is a hitman turned actor who is attempting to leave his old life as a hitman, but is constantly dragged back into it by himself, but also by his adversaries like his old mentor Fuchs and NoHo Hank and Goron and a bunch of different people who all basically don't want Barry to leave because he's really good at his job, but he wants to leave because he doesn't want to do it anymore. Hijinks ensue, and over the years, these hijinks have become a lot more dark. In general, every single season has been more dark than the last one, I'd say, except maybe Season 2 is a little funnier than Season 1. I don't know. Basically, by this point, we've gotten to a very disturbing show that is probably going to be submitted for comedy at the Enemies. This show couldn't really go on too long, to be honest. See, with a crime-type show, eventually it's gonna end because it's just gonna get unrealistic, you know? The main character is gonna get out of these extremely confusing and very over-the-top situations, and it's like, how would they do that? And at one point, it's just like, maybe we just need to end it here, because there's no way they would be escaping these consequences, and also, maybe they just deserve those consequences. Barry is a murderer, and despite his attempts to become an actor in the early seasons, by the time you get a little deep into the show, you see that he's kind of just a shithead, and he's not a very good person at all, so he kind of deserves the consequences coming to him. And plus, Bill Hader, the show's creator, is like Barry's number one hater, and so I think he kind of wanted him to really get hit hard with this last season. And I mean, he already got hit hard in last season, so this time around, it's even worse. So you do need to talk about the episode itself, and so I'll do that. With the setup from the previous episode, you have NoHo Hank has captured Barry's wife, girlfriend, I don't think they're married, but it feels like they are, Sally, as well as his son, John, after the crazy 8-year time skip. But we'll get to that. Basically, in the finale, Barry has to go to Hank to try to rescue Sally and John, and he has to also run in with Fuchs, who is part of this deal that Hank was in so that he could capture them. Basically, everything's happening at once. All the characters are intersecting, all their plot lines are coming together, and since they haven't seen each other in 8 years, most of them at least, it's a very dramatic moment. I personally loved A Nice Meal, which was the penultimate episode of the season, setting up the finale. And I thought that the way that they paid it off in this one was very good, at least when you compare it against the last episode. When you compare it against the rest of the show, there's a lot more to be talked about, but as a follow-up to A Nice Meal, and in general, as the last episode of Season 4, fantastic. I love this show, and as someone who was never a fan of Game of Thrones, I do not wish to ever get Game of Thrones. I do not want to see a show incredibly good have a finale that kind of just fucks it all in the end. And it did not do that at all. For a little behind the scenes, even though obviously I was not participating in the creation of Barry, I just know this, Bill Hader wrote Season 3 and Season 4 at about the same time during COVID, and I think that really shows. Barry Season 3 and Barry Season 4 are the two darkest seasons of the show, and they kind of just show the fall of Barry. Everything that happens in these episodes throughout these seasons shows that Barry is not really a good guy, and he doesn't really deserve to be happy or to have a second chance, because he's had second chances, and he's just not pursuing them hard enough. You know, when the temptation of crime comes towards him, he usually takes the opportunity and devolves straight back into his regular life, and so he's gonna need to get what's coming to him. And that's what Season 3 and Season 4 are about. And so, in this final episode, Barry dies. But we gotta build up to that, okay? Big spoiler, I know, but if you're here, you should know that by now. Barry dies. And first, he goes to, of course, rescue Sally and John. There, Fuchs and Hank have this showdown where Fuchs forces Hank to try to, to confess that he killed Cristobal, who was Hank's boyfriend from the previous episodes, who died in episode 4 due to Hank wanting to participate in the gang violence, while Cristobal did not. And unfortunately, it did not go too well, and it doesn't go too well here either. Fuchs had already brought this up in episode 6, and here it goes even worse. Hank tries to pull a gun on him, then Fuchs shoots Hank, and the whole thing goes crazy. All of Fuchs's men die, all of Hank's men die. Hank himself dies, holding the hand of the golden statue of Cristobal, which is heartbreaking and really beautiful. And that leads to one of the main things this season. Bill Hader is directing every episode, and of course you get some very experimental stuff, because the guy has become more experimental as the show has gone on, and the shot of Hank holding Cristobal's hand is really beautiful. It's a really great final shot, and even though I do have some qualms with how they killed Hank, or just the fact that they killed Hank at all, that scene is fantastic. We all knew character deaths were going to go down in the final season. It's a crime show where I don't think any other main character has died, aside from, like, Goron and Moss in the first season. So this happening is a very, very big moment for the show. And I think they played it well. I think the directing during that scene is really great. And Anthony Carrigan and Stephen Root's performance during that scene, masterful. Absolutely masterful. Some of their best performances, both of them, in the entire show. So then Barry shows up, and he basically spells out the fact that he's going to die while in the car. He says to literal God, "I'm going to die tonight." And then he walks in, everything's kind of already over, and he just takes John and Sally and goes. First, he has a little stare down with Fuchs, his old mentor, who has had a rivalry for basically the entire show, and he lets him go. And Fuchs does too. And that is Fuchs's last scene in the entire show, which I actually kind of like. I actually really like that. But there's another plot to be tied up. Kusino, the acting teacher, who has been accused of basically manipulating Barry into doing all of the crimes that he's done, such as killing Kusino's girlfriend, Janice Moss, which was seemingly because Janice found out about Kusino's wrongdoings. This is not true, but this is the situation he's in now. Barry goes to his house looking for Sally, who has disappeared along with John, thinking that she's gone there for hospitality since she mentioned him earlier. She did not, and instead he finds Tom, Kusino's sort of agent guy, who tells him that he should turn himself in. Barry decides to agree, and then he gets shot, and then he gets shot again, and that is the end of Barry. He got killed by Kusino, which is pretty crazy, because Kusino is one of the civilian characters along with Sally, and he had never killed a person before. Every other main character had. Now, it's over. That's it. Kusino has killed a person, Barry, and that is everyone. Checked off. And it's a good way to end the whole show. It's a good way to end Barry. I really do think that this was a good death for Barry. However, I do think that Barry's imprisonment in Season 3, at the end of Season 3, which was also done by Gene Kusino, is flawless. I think it should have ended there, to be honest. I do think that while I did enjoy Season 4, it didn't entirely justify existing. It really had to, since Season 3's ending seemed like the ending, and with minor changes to some of the other characters' arcs, it could have been the ending. But in the end, Gene getting the ultimate revenge on Barry for killing Janice Moss, being that he kills Barry himself to sacrifice his reputation but to avenge her, is really good. It's a really good ending. and the fact that in the end, Gene is seen as the villain and Barry is seen as the hero because, Gene murdered Barry in front of a witness. Obviously, it's going to go down really badly. I think that's great. I think it's a very dark way to end it, but at the same time, Gene sort of got what he wanted, I'd say. I think in the end, it's a great way to conclude his arc since he spent the whole fucking series basically trying to profit for himself and never really was trying to avenge Janice. And in the end, he was, and he did. Would it have been nice for Barry to turn himself in and say, yes, I did all of those crimes? Yeah, but I don't think it would have helped. I think it was a lost cause, which really sucks, but Kusano got his revenge, so I'm happy about that. And Barry was laid to rest with full honors, as we learned from the movie, and Kusano is serving life in prison. It's a very disturbing end to a very disturbing season, and I don't mind it. I think it's great. And that's all. Barry and Hank dead, and the show over. The show over is kind of crazy. It's still something I'm gonna be processing for a bit. Now, I know that sounds overdramatic, but it really is, Getting to the next Sunday, next week, and noticing, oh, no Barry and no Succession is gonna be a very strange thing for me, and as someone who's really cared about these shows, it's pretty sad, but the way that Barry went out has made me really excited for the future, and especially Bill Hader's future, as a horror director now, I guess. After scenes such as Sally's quote-unquote home invasion in episode 6, I think that is a very realistic concept, and I guess it's happening. It's a very interesting thing to see, someone who used to be a comedy actor, he can still be a comedy actor, sure, but we've seen an SNL alum grow out of his shell and become something very interesting. Bill Hader casted as Fear. It's a classic, and it's a very interesting thing to watch, and I think we're going to be continuing to watch. As for everything else, you got Hank, you got Sally, you got Fuchs, and you got Kusano as the other four main characters. When it comes to Sally's ending, it's a little strange. She has John as a son, which I think is a good thing, but also it's just very strange that she managed to sort of escape. She's not in jail, as we see when we flash forward to teenaged John. She's actually semi-famous, probably not very famous, but she's getting somewhere, and I'm surprised by that, but I'm happy. I think Sally is probably the character who deserved the best ending. She's sort of the Skylar White of the show, in that she's not that bad of a person, she's just kind of annoying. And since she's a woman, there's just a section of the fan base that hates her. But I think she deserved a good ending, and I'm very happy that it happened, even if it kind of makes no sense. Hey, I don't know shit about law, so maybe it makes sense. Who knows? Who knows? And in the end, all of the passion that I've had for this show, the love that I've had, is not over. Even if the show is over, I'm going to be rewatching it, I'm going to be dissecting it, I'm probably going to be thinking about it and making videos about it and talking about it, and I really love this show. And HBO is definitely going to go through a drought with its two most popular running shows gone. I think they're the most popular. I don't know. There's probably more they got stored up, but it doesn't look like The Idol, or whatever it's called, is going to go that well, so let's see where they go from here. I'll be talking about Succession soon, too. I really love this show.